Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined us at the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast. Today, I have a very dear friend and wonderful guest to introduce to you. His name is Eric McGrath from a company called Driven Leadership. So Eric and I go quite a way back. We met years and years ago when he worked for a different company, and we were talking about some kind of partnership. And what ended up happening is we decided to trade services. So the idea was I was going to experience his leadership format and he was going to experience mine. Well, what ended up happening is, for me personally, I experienced, let's call it an experience that has stayed with me ever since. It left an indelible mark, and it helped me understand exactly the difference between my performance and my potential. For Eric, well, he went through the Frame of Mind coaching experience with me. Lucky guy. I'll let him talk about that. Eric, welcome.
Hey, excited to be here. Really excited. It's good to see you.
So every time we connect and talk, for me, it's like reconnecting with an old friend. Yeah. And it's just like we just step right back to where we left off and nothing's changed. So it's a wonderful feeling. So I'm thrilled to have you on.
It is absolutely mutual. And, you talk about that training leaving that mark. And I got to say, your coaching program, I can mark after going through that, all the shifts, the changes, the application from my personal life and my son as he was growing up to business life and how it's all come together. So 100%.
I remember one conversation we had, and I coach a lot of people, so I don't remember all the conversation, but I remember the conversation where you were not happy that your son wasn't eating vegetables. That's the conversation I remember. Yeah. I remember coaching you on that. But yes, I think, like, for me, one of the most memorable pieces was the struggle you were having with your son and how that kind of shifted over time as a result of our conversations. Not to mention, you changed jobs, you started a new career, right. you made some changes in your relationship. But for me, it's the thing with your son that really matters, those vegetables.
Vegetables are important.
Yes. So I want to jump forward. You run a company now called Driven Leadership. What does that mean? Who are you serving? And more importantly, how do you serve them?
Thanks for asking. So Driven Leadership was created. I actually started the company with my wife. We still run it together. And it came down. I love this topic that we're talking about today because we're getting into human potential, the potential of a team or culture or business. And that's really what our business does. We have a very specific process that focuses in, parts of it focus in on the individual as a leader and helping them step into what is leadership, how to enact that, and how to raise, so to speak, their potential, their bar, and create a different result in their life. And we do that through training. We also work with teams and cultures. So where it's a little bit different, similar format, but where we get to work with teams of people and help them step into where they are, and they want to go somewhere different. And what's that gap, and how do we get there? And so that's our business.
So I want to talk about this whole issue of potential, because my experience, and I know, like, really what you're doing with people is similar to my experience. My experience was like, I thought walking into this training experience was like, hey, you know what? I'm doing pretty well. Like, I am living up to my potential. I'm performing at a high level. And you know what? Especially, and honestly, at the time, I think I had a lot of ego kind of in my head. Compared to all these other people in the room, I'm really doing well, right? But when I got there and, everybody had a turn, especially at the very beginning, and you can decide what you want to give away. But when my turn came up, the leader in the session at the time basically failed me. In my performance. And I'm like, what? How is that possible? Like, I slayed this task. I, outperformed everybody. How is it that I failed? And what he was really saying is, you didn't fail in comparison to everybody else. You failed in comparison to your potential. Yeah. So what I want to talk about right now is, like, why is there such a huge gap? Like, what is that actually about between a person's performance and the way they show up in life and their actual potential? Where does that come from? What is that about?
Well, I think, when we started talking about this topic and bringing this to the podcast, I really started thinking about it. And the first place I go is first and foremost defining potential. And what are we really talking about here? And I think especially when we talk about an individual, it's similar but different than when we're talking about the potential of a team or the potential of a culture in a business. And specifically when we're talking about that individual potential, a lot of times that connects very strongly with self-belief. So I'd actually say if we're really using self-belief in place of potential, a lot of people are living up to their potential. The challenge is their self-belief, what they got going on in here in their head as to what their potential really is. And so, rather than, just kind of taking a little different direction, rather than saying helping people live up to their potential, it's much more about helping them see what is possible and actually believing and buying into what's reality. A lot of people I think would say potential is what I hope things to be. So it's kind of this expectation we put on ourselves. So, I got a glass of water here, right? And if I take this glass of water and you call the potential for the amount of water in here is the glass, most people are going through life and they're going, well, that's my glass. That's what I got. And so I can get right up to the rim. I can get there and I'm doing all that, but I can envision a much bigger glass. And so I'm going through life thinking, well, I'm supposed to have this huge glass, but my self-belief is this small. And so we never step into the expectation, and then there's just gap. And then within that gap comes shame and, concerns, lack of confidence, all the stuff that goes on.
So there's two things that now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
So there's two things. One is this whole issue of the glass. Like, what do I envision if this is my glass? I have a glass too.
You have a glass
too. This
too.
is my glass. If this is my glass, but really I could be envisioning a much bigger glass. Do I prevent myself from doing that because my current reality is so far away,
right,
and the gap causes me great discomfort? Is
right,
that what it's about? And so when we don't allow ourselves to envision that bigger glass, is that a mechanism for self-protection?
100%, right? So it's all these survival mechanisms that we build up to tolerate where we're at. Yeah. So really what we dive into, and the training that you took specifically, it was a leadership development program, and it's a program designed to help people really handle stress, pressure, and change, and to lead through that. And a big part of that is changing our reality as to what's possible, how we see ourselves. So if I see myself as someone, I loved how you talked about going into the class. I'm the deal, right? You came in and that's awesome. So
a true story.
Right, but stepping in and having these expectations of performance and expectations of how I show up, and then to get in there, and it sounds like for whatever reason the trainer may have had some different expectations, and
clearly.
And those weren't meeting up, and so you fail to process, and trainings like this, we call them experiential immersive trainings, where you're experiencing the process-based, you're doing things the entire time. So instead of it being about somebody's ideas of what your potential is, it's really you step into, you get to show up, right? And you get to either step into the process and nailing it and bringing all those strengths to bear, or what most people do is they step into the process and different things will take over. It could be fear, it could be self-doubt, it could be a lot of times the story that we have going on in our head starts to kick in.
Yeah.
And then reality shows up in that type of a training. And the difference between those two, right, is this shift that people go through over the days that they're there in the training. And so why that particular process works, why that style of training creates a lasting and long-term impression, is because you actually get to close the gap. You get to see yourself probably past where you may have ever seen yourself before.
Yeah.
And by having that vision and understanding what is possible, and that you stepped into it, once you've done it one time, why can't you do it again? And then you start taking that possibility of what you did in the classroom and you take it back into real life. And so you start looking at the potential differently.
Yeah. So one of the things that I remember most is that, they talk about experiential learning, right? They
Yeah.
do. And that can be a lot of things, but I have never, and I've done a lot of training in my day, right? A lot of experiential learning, but I have never experienced something that involved to such degree my physiology, my, I don't even know how to describe it, my energy, my focus, that heightened intensity of physical engagement. And I'm not talking about like climbing, tight
Right.
rope walking. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a whole, and so that physiological engagement for me created, I guess, a synaptic charge that left a deep, deep mark.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting, and again, total transparency, is that I walked away going, holy crap. No, I'm not even scratching the surface of my potential. And while that certainly pushed me to another level, I'm still not scratching the surface of my potential.
Right.
And so the question becomes, how do we continue? And obviously I have my own approach, but still I'm human,
Yeah.
right? So how do we continue to chip away at the beliefs, those self-limiting beliefs that keep us playing smaller than our capacity?
Yeah. Well, shameless plug for what you do. I think one of the best things to chip away is to have a coach, right? Without a doubt, right?
For sure.
So if you're getting consistent feedback from somebody and guiding in a safe place, in a trusted place, in my opinion, there's almost nothing better. So what you're really talking about, to me, in my language of what we do, what you're really talking about is how do I continue to shift behavior towards the type of behavior that's going to lead to the outcomes I want in my life?
Yeah.
And how do I live a life of growth, of that mindset of constantly stepping into sometimes the unknown or something different? And, there's a lot of things that go into that. But first and foremost, there's got to be the want, right? Is there enough of a desire? So many people say, yeah, I want a better life. I want a better family. I want better relationships. I want a better business. I want to make whatever it is. And really what they do is they sit on the sidelines and they seem to just kind of bitch about it, but they don't really take any action. And to me, a lot of times that comes down, that's because the pain, it's not painful enough. For whatever reason, maybe their upbringing or whatever goes on, or maybe it happens slowly over time, that they've gotten kind of sedentary in where they're at. And because of that, if the pain's not enough for them to first have the strong desire to want to make a shift, they're more than likely not going to do the hard work that's required to start making that shift. But that's first and foremost, right? Have the awareness, have the want, have the desire. Then when we step into it, it's like, where do we want to go? Having clear goals, having clear destinations. But first and foremost, or I guess over everything else, is that so many people seem to want the outside world to change without them having the inside change, right? So it's like, I want to make more money. So what's the answer? I'm going to go get a different job. Yeah, and you might make a little bit more money. But if you don't do the inner work, the self-belief work, the understanding of who you are and really what you want so that you confidently step into it. Even I was thinking about, you get a chance often to work with managers who are working with some of the newer generation that are coming in. And some of the newer generation, you talk about self-belief. I mean, they're stepping in going, I just got out of college. I should be making $120,000 a year, and I should be running this place. And some of them are in that place with the strong self-belief. And God love them, some of them probably should be. I mean, some of them are so talented when they step in. Yet, a lot of them haven't done maybe the work. They've got the self-belief part, but they haven't done the other side.
Which is backwards from where we come from, right?
Right. So our the older generation, I got to own that, right? So, but
you're old now.
Yeah. But the older generation, right? It was do the work and then the other stuff comes around. They've kind of flip-flopped it.
So I want to go back to something you said, because I'm like battling it in my head. I'm listening and I'm like, oh, geez, is that true? Is that true? Is that true? So this whole idea of the pain has to be bad enough for you to have the desire big enough to start taking action. So sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not true. Sometimes you have to and from my perspective, pain creates a desire for change, but you can't change if you're in that state of pain. You've got to somehow move your head to a new place away from the pain in
Sure.
order for the change to be the change you want. Because if you try to change from that place of pain, what you're going to receive is more pain and maybe a different costume, right? So you might start off with a piece of pain, but your mind has to go forward to a new place in order to envision yourself in that better place. And when you're there, then the change that takes place, and where the struggle becomes is, I can imagine myself in a better place. I'm not sure I could believe that I can be there or get there or that I deserve it, right? So sometimes our imagination can go, but our belief drags us.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
So thank you for clarifying. I just mean that there's got to be some type of point that makes us say, hey, you know what? I want to make a shift. But you're right. If you're going to live in the pain, you're just going to make it worse.
You're going to make it worse. So,
right.
so that's really, really important. So it's interesting. I was talking this morning, and I know this has nothing to do with anything we're talking about, but I was talking this morning with my team, and we were talking about some TV shows. And one of the shows we were talking about is My 600-Pound Life. You ever seen that? So there's this guy who's the doctor, and he's not a very pleasant or nice man, but he's the doctor. And he brings someone in who's 600 pounds. And basically the process is the same for every person. You need to lose 100 pounds before I can operate on you. And so they go, okay. Like they're following, they're listening, they know, they understand. And then they go off and they try to lose 100 pounds. And inevitably they fail, or inevitably they lose some weight and then they revert back to old behavior. And then they go see the doctor again with a great deal of shame because they haven't achieved their goal. What does the doctor do? The doctor berates them, right? Like, hey, if you really want this, like, do you really want it? And he's like in their face. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of thinking, kind of mindset is required? Okay, failing severe physical issues, right? What kind of mindset is going on for a person who weighs 600 pounds? Do you think that they feel good about themselves? Probably not, right? And do you think that bad feeling helped them get to that 600-pound place? In all likelihood. So now, does berating them help them feel better so that they can get to a better place, or does it make it worse? Right. So the way we feel about ourselves will profoundly impact our ability to take action. Right. So you're like, okay, people are sitting on the sidelines and they're not taking action. Agreed. So is it enough to just have that pain to create sustainable action? Right. What's required?
Well, I think it's a starting place, and maybe it's everybody's a little different. Yet at the end of the day, there's got to be something that says I want to do something different, right? Yeah. And from that place, then it becomes about action, stepping into it. Wins are really powerful and really, really good. And so as we start to have wins and stepping into success, even on the small level, but there's so many people, right? They start to have wins and all they focus on are the one little mistake that they made instead of the 10 wins that they're having.
Yes.
So where do we focus? And a lot of times a big part of this that makes it all work is who we're surrounded by, right? So going back, we talk about coaching, but our sphere of influence on a day-to-day basis, who are we bringing into that circle, and how well are they supporting us, and how are they helping us when we're getting off track and focusing on the non-wins and getting us back into a place that we are. There's so many books, there's so many things written about how to step into, and there's kind of a formula at this point. What we say to ourselves, are we doing the work? Everything from meditation to affirmation to whatever it is. Who do we surround ourselves with?
I'm a bit of an affirmation skeptic, but that's a whole other story. Okay.
How you use it, right? So there are, and I know if I sit there and I stare in the mirror and I go, you're great. I mean, okay. But if it's something that we connect emotion to, it has a different, and that's really where it comes down to. A long time ago, I read an article, and to me, this has really become true about how to change behavior, that there were only 2 ways to change behavior. And forgive me, I don't remember who wrote the article or any of
that. I'm interested in those 2 things.
Well, so the one way was basically repetition. So it was, which is how most of school, most of our upbringing, that's what we're taught, is that repetition, which it does work, right? We stay in it long enough and we keep getting it from advertisers, use it all the time, right?
Right.
More times we're exposed to something. It'll create a different result. And the second way is deep emotional impact. And so when something has strong emotion, we can shift, and people shift on a dime if the emotion is strong enough. And, you know, a few years ago, my father passed away 3 years ago now. And several years before that, he had spent 25 years pretty overweight. And he almost looked swollen, which we found out later was a heart condition that he never got treated. But we were constantly on him, right? We're like, exercise, eat better. You know, we wanted to change this habit, and we're externally motivating him, and it's not working. It's kind of like, you know, your example. And it's like, you know, I'm quite sure I was that guy quite a bit with my dad, right? I'm like, what are you doing? And yet it just, nothing was shifting, nothing was changing. And then somewhere along the way, he hadn't been diagnosed with diabetes, but he had a diabetic fit, right? And he was out in a restaurant, and he almost passed away there. He was in the hospital for like a week. And it sunk in, and nobody had to tell him to work out. Nobody had told him, I mean, the doctors told him to eat differently, but at the end of the day, he made a decision. He lost 100 pounds in a year, you know, and why did that shift happen? Yeah, he got scared. Deep emotional impact. There was a fear that hit him. There was, like, yeah, go ahead.
So like, this is great, because there are three things I want to say. First, you talked about this whole idea of repetition. And so the whole idea of repetition is how beliefs are formed. When we think the same thought over and over and over again, and when our experiences reinforce those thoughts, we create beliefs. Okay, so that's that whole thing about repetition. So that's one thing. When, you know, we've heard enough from the outside that, hey, you're smart. Sometimes at some point you say, well, maybe I'm smart, right? And you start to take it on. But the second thing is very interesting, is what did you call it? Deep emotional
impact. Yeah.
Deep emotional impact. So deep emotional impact is, it takes a moment, right, to actually cause you, because you have that emotional reaction, to get to a place of what I would call cognitive dissonance, right? And which creates that emotional reaction. So the cognitive dissonance for your father is, hey, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to die. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. That's not consistent with my life plan, which is to live. Right? So there's a moment of cognitive dissonance where in that moment, a choice needs to be made and a new belief has to be inherited or taken on. Now, my experience of you is, you as a business create those emotional experiences so that instant change takes place, right? So that a person is forced to say, well, hold on a minute. If I'm capable of this, why am I playing so low?
Right.
So small, right? Why am I doing that? That doesn't jive with what I want in my life. Time to play a bigger game.
100%. And yet we found when we combine these two, it is magic, right? So we have this deep emotional impact, and then we support that. We have follow-up programs that we do, and strongly support coaching coming in and all these other things that are attached to it. But when you have them both going together, people make radical shifts. It sticks. And at the end of it, their whole life transforms. And usually in a lot of ways they weren't expecting, because those thoughts and those things that we have that were keeping us in one place are laced into pretty much everything that we do.
So I don't know if I'm giving away the secret or whatever. Can you describe any one of those? Like, I can describe an emotional experience that I had going through the training, but can you choose one that you feel comfortable sharing if you want?
Sure. Yeah.
To say, like, here's what happens. Here's an emotional experience that happens for people when we take them through this particular exercise.
You know, I have so many stories, and there's one that, and maybe it was because I was just looking at him on Instagram, but there's one that just stands out like nobody's business. It was a kid. We have a teen program that we do as well, and we had a kid that went through. He was an older kid going through a teen program. Right? He was top of his teens, and just full of a lot of. He kind of had that persona on the outside, like I've got it all together, but on the inside, as you start to dig down, it was built upon a lot of self-doubt, right? And so in going through our team program and really looking at, him and owning who he was, it was amazing to watch the lights come on, right? But then we talk about leaving. So he left, finished up high school, and he was a dancer. And part of it was dancing wasn't necessary, especially in the school that he was in, wasn't really looked upon as being, a credible means of life, or there were all these stigmas that were coming with it. And so as he started to own who he was and not worry about what people were thinking and so on and so forth, and he just started diving into it. Well, he was on the iHeart Radio Awards dancing behind, it was Rihanna or
Wow.
Carly B or something. He went on tour with
Cardi, not Carly.
Okay. He went on tour with Rihanna. He was dancing with, he was behind Beyonce on her tour. This guy, right? Wow. He's in his low 20s and he's just blowing it up all over the place. And I don't want to say our class was why all this happened. Our class was a piece to the bigger puzzle.
Right.
But human beings are a puzzle, right? And as we add more pieces to this and give them more tools, and they have that deep emotional impact, and he happened to go back, and he went back to a family that was extremely supportive and just said, we just want you to step in your potential. What does that look like? What do you see it as?
Right.
And then it took off. I'll shift to the other end. I'll give you a different side of the story. We had a gentleman come through. He was a lieutenant colonel in the military. He actually worked heavily. Actually, you know him. You know him.
I really do.
He came through, and he was at a stage where he was in the military and really wanted to pursue other things, such as coaching, such as really helping and developing people and doing it in his own unique way. And was just struggling with that transition. How do I go from here? I'm a high-ranking officer in the military. He commanded incredible missions and flew Apache helicopters and commanded some of our best forces out there. And how do I go from that to a completely different civilian life and transfer over here? And that transition was tough, right? And so again, being a piece to the puzzle, a catalyst, a deep emotional impact, and then going back to surrounded by a group of people that supported it, helped him make that transition. He's been to you to learn how to be a coach and to go out there and do that. And he's living his life's dream and potential.
Yeah. And talk about a different course of action, right? He's going down one path and he took like a sharp right turn.
Sharp right turn. But he wanted to take it. And how do we, so many of us have these things that we want, right? Some of us, it can be as simple as I want the bigger house and I want the white picket fence, but really, most of us want something a lot more, right? We want the amazing relationships. We want the life that's fulfilling and connected to our purpose and what we love to do. Yeah. And so many of us are afraid to take the steps, or we'll take a step and it doesn't work right. And then we go, oh, well, it's not supposed to be or whatever. And then we shrink back to where we were.
Right. It wasn't meant to be. Right. Yeah.
Or whatever we want to put around it. But it's really just a way of saying, you know what, it's safer to just stay here. This is the safe space, and I can go the rest of my life in a safe space and just not step into the potential. And so many people do it.
Absolutely. And it's very, very interesting because I think that people stay in a safe space, and the word safe says it all, for a reason that theoretically serves them. It keeps me safe. So I just got off a coaching call with a gentleman who's in a relationship that isn't very fulfilling. And he's been in this relationship for a while. And my question was, so like, what keeps you in this relationship? And he kind of went silent. And I'm like, I don't mean to push you, but I don't understand how this relationship is working for you. Is this your ideal relationship? He says, no, there are lots of pieces missing. I said, well, do you discuss this? Do you well, no, not really. Right. So he's used to this state of affairs, right? Like people are used to what they're in. And sometimes they just tolerate what they're in because sometimes they can't imagine anything else. But a lot of times they might be able to imagine something else, but they make a decision that says, yeah, but that'll never be for me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think your program shatters that idea to bits, and says anything is for you. Anything you want is right there for your taking. And so you create these wild experiences for people where they walk away going, holy smokes, like I came in one way and I walked out completely different. I'm a different person. I was a fraction of myself when I walked in. And even one more thing, even something as little as knowing the capacity of your voice, like literally your voice.
Right.
You don't know what your voice can do. And you show that to us. Incredible.
That's awesome. As you're talking, I want to, anybody listen to this, I want to clarify, because we get these type of questions as we talk about stuff like this. You're not jumping off any cliffs, right? Actually, class you took.
I look like a cliff jumper to you. Come on.
I've had people ask, well, do you feed them bugs or what? No, it's nothing like that, right? It's and part of the reason we don't get into the specific process is because it's part of the process to not know what's next, right? The unknown. What we do in there is we get people out of their comfort zone, preferably not into the panic zone, although some step into there, but we get them out of their comfort zone, and we use a variety of different process and technique that they go through. You're completely safe the entire time, but you're working on you out of your comfort zone. And as you do that, as you experience, you can have these breakthroughs. And as you have a breakthrough, they build, right? You have a breakthrough, you see yourself different, and you build upon that and that idea of who you are. And then you continue to build upon that until as you walk out of this thing, not only are you kind of bulletproof and on cloud nine, because there's this incredible experience. I always tell people they get one of two things. They get, or not one of two things, they get two things. They get motivation and inspiration. And motivation, it wears off, right? It's you're in this incredible environment, all this stuff's going on, and that's great. That was externally stimulated to help you. And it wear off, 30, 60 days later, the motivation piece, you go back to normal life.
Yeah.
The inspiration stuff, that's the stuff you can't unsee. You can't Go ahead.
Because it doesn't come from outside of you. It comes from inside of you. That's the difference.
It is. It's all internal, and you see yourself at a different plateau. You see yourself at a different level. And it's like I can still remember when I don't know how old I was, like 10 or 11 years old, and cliff diving off this huge jump, right? It just stuck with me. I was like, wow, I really did that. Now, again, we're not cliff diving in the class, but once you can't unsee that.
Yeah. I want to throw one more thing in, because I think this is important too. I remember the class that I was in. I don't even remember the number or whatever, but the class I was in, so there were a bunch of us sitting in this side by side by side by side. And I could not believe the diversity in the class. So there was one person in this class who was literally like a janitor. They clean hotel rooms, like they make beds in hotels. And the next person was a truck driver, and the person after that was a philanthropist, like loaded, and her job, her function in life was to determine where to give the funds that she had, right? So like the dramatic extreme of the status, you could say, of the people in the room was striking. And what was even more striking was that in that room, status had no bearing, didn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't matter at all.
Isn't that powerful though? You're sitting next to a CEO, or, it's incredible the gap that can happen from a status standpoint, but we all are the same. We all have the same stuff, and we can really all learn from each other when put in the right environment.
Yeah. Anyways, it was an incredible experience. So Eric, where can people find you? Like, how can people learn about this really obscure thing we're talking about? How do they find you?
Easiest place to go is to our website, drivenleadership.com. Just reach out to us via there. Easiest, best way to do it. And we'll kind of talk through it. To go to the class that you went to, we do it on a nomination basis only. And so we do sometimes, if somebody calls us up out of the blue, we take them through a process and we'll nominate them for it.
So I'll tell you what, whoever's listening to this, I nominate you. So go tell Eric. You'll tell Eric that Kim nominated me because I listened to the podcast. Can we
the whole thing about that is not to push people.
I can't do that.
The whole piece behind that is we just want to make sure when people are going, because when you get a group of like-minded people that are really wanting to push themselves, if it's somebody that really wants to make a shift, it's an amazing process, and so that's the whole point behind it. We don't want somebody going because their boss made them go or something along those lines. We want people that want to step into and want to make that shift. That's all.
Yeah, amazing. So Driven Leadership. Go check them out. Go learn about what they do. Go talk to someone from there. If you're not talking to Eric, you're talking to Mary, who's his wife, who's even more amazing than Eric.
She is.
So please look into it. It's amazing. Eric, thank you for spending this time with me. I love the conversation. I love this subject. It's my subject.
Right.
So it's always fun to talk to you. And until we talk again.
You're awesome. Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.